Well, left-wing politicians turned out yesterday in large numbers to support the students who walked out of school to join anti-gun protests. New York Governor Andrew Cuomo prostrated himself literally before these new Red Guards while joining in chants borrowed from Latin American revolutionaries. Watch this.
What do we want? What do we want it now? What do we want? What do we want it now?
Students united will never be defeated. Students united will never be defeated.
Enough is enough.
That was not the CNN anchor. That was his rhythm-challenged brother, buffoon. Senator Bernie Sanders participated as well, by the way.
Young people here demanding that we have the courage to take on the NRA, to pass common sense gun safety legislation that the vast majority of the American people want. It is a beautiful day, and these are beautiful young people.
Do you think?
So Sanders and Cuomo attended these rallies, but they didn't go alone. They were escorted by bodyguards paid for by you who went to protect them. Those bodyguards were armed, of course, with guns. Cuomo's bodyguards allowed to carry more than 10 rounds in their magazines. Now, if you wanted to protect yourself in the same way in New York, you'd be thrown in prison, and some people, of course, already have been. There's no ambiguity here. In a republic, and we're supposed to live in one, the rulers cannot hold themselves to standards different from the ruled. They're not nobles. They're citizens, just like you and me. You can't surround yourself with an armed retinue and then tell the rest of us we don't have a right to defend ourselves. That's worse than flying your private jet to accept a climate change award. Ethan Behrman is a radio show host in California, and he joins us tonight. So, Ethan, it seems pretty simple. I'm actually not calling for disarming bodyguards. I think the threats out there are real. I happen to know that they are. I'm just hoping that we can have the same standard for our rulers and the ruled. If I can't have a magazine that holds more than 10 rounds, why do Andrew Cuomo's bodyguards, whom I'm paying for, get to do that?
Interestingly enough, I was not aware that his bodyguards did. I know in the case of Bernie Sanders, those were standard law enforcement issued sidearms that were 10-round magazines.
They're not 10-round magazines. Hold on, wait. I'm not bragging, but I do actually know about this. A Glock mag has more than 10 in it. They don't have 10-round magazines. They have magazines bigger than you're allowed in New York if you're non-law enforcement. So we're paying their bodyguards to carry. No, okay, they're not allowed in New York. They're allowed in Vermont. I'm just saying all law enforcement. They don't limit their rounds in their magazines. Why would they do that? That's insane. But they're asking that we do it, even as we pay for their bodyguards to be better armed. How does that work?
Yeah, I actually kind of agree and disagree with you. So first off, Andrew Cuomo's bodyguards should be stuck with the same limit that we are calling for, which is a 10-round magazine. Other than special teams for law enforcement, like SWAT teams and whatnot, they'll have very special circumstances that they would have greater round magazines at their disposal for specific situations. But the average law enforcement officer should be carrying a 10-round magazine, just like we would call for anybody else in a standard semi-automatic configuration.
What do you think they'll do something wrong with it? I mean, I'm actually not arguing to disarm the police. I'm arguing to let people
I'm not either.
have the same protection that their rulers, that their politicians have, whose salaries we're paying. Why would you want to, in effect, lower the effectiveness of a bodyguard?
Well, because what is the circumstance where you're going to need more than 10-round magazines? Better yet, here's the argument that actually a lot of my friends who are deeply into firearms make is larger than 10-round magazines have a higher percentage rate of jamming. You're actually hurting the opportunity of the law enforcement officer to do their job properly.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, they're kind of experts on this question, though. I mean, I think your average cop knows a lot more about what makes an effective firearm than your average, in my case, cable news host. But let's let them decide. But can we just agree that politicians shouldn't be allowed to set one standard for themselves above the standard they require of everyone else? That's like a basic democratic principle the left used to be for, I thought.
Yeah, and actually we do agree on that, and that's why I am saying that his bodyguards should be limited. If he is calling for 10-round magazine limits, and like you said in New York, that is the case, then the bodyguards should have that same limitation, which is a 10-round magazine. I agree with you. There is a hypocrisy that is happening there that I don't agree with either.
But, I mean, this is universal. I mean, it's not just that. I mean, politicians of all kinds, ones you agree with and ones you don't agree with, have all kinds of people with semi-automatic carbines underneath their trench coats. I mean, they're very heavily armed. The government, including local law enforcement, has military vehicles. I mean, do you see what I'm saying? You're setting up a class of people who are cutting themselves off from the people they're supposed to be ruling in the most hypocritical possible way. I don't know. Why not just pass a law that says you can't pass any gun control that your bodyguards don't abide by? Would you be for that? We could just settle the argument right there.
I mean, the bodyguard specifically, I don't agree with you on the local law enforcement. Local law enforcement is dealing with issues that requires them to have things like bear cats. We've seen them used very successfully now in a number of operations across the country. Local law enforcement and the state police powers require that the state have an opportunity to arm more like the military than your average citizen.
Look,
and by the way, Scalia said as much in the 2008 D.C. versus Heller that we can
just
regulate
simplify
that.
it? Can we simplify it? And I wonder if we get the Brady people and the Bloomberg people on board with this. No politician can vote for any piece of gun control legislation that he or she would not apply to him or herself. I mean, why wouldn't you do that?
I'm all for that, 100%.
Good.
No, I actually totally agree with you on that point, that the politician should have to abide by what they're imposing on the rest of us. But I separate the police differently because you brought up the police.
No, I mean, I think that's probably
probably
a fair point. I think that's right. Really quickly, I don't know if you've got kids, but I think a lot of parents looked at what happened yesterday, even if they agreed with the gun control sentiments and said, you know, you probably shouldn't be using kids as political props. Would you have been okay with it if teachers were bringing kids to some kind of right-wing march or pro-gun march or Milo Yiannopoulos march? Would that have been okay with you?
Well, so interestingly enough, I don't want teachers necessarily doing that. I want them to teach the background. I want them to teach a history, maybe explain what's going on. But I want the kids to do it on their own. And actually here in California, it was mostly the kids doing it on their own. And I fully support them speaking out, defending their idea of being safe in their educational facilities.
All right. Ethan Behrman, great to see you. Thanks for coming on. Former FBI Director Andrew McCabe is just days from retirement. He could be canned before he retires. Does he deserve that? That story's next with details.
Tucker Carlson is brought to you by Pacific Life, protecting generations of families for 150 years. That's the power of Pacific.